Hello and welcome to the Extraordinary Living Podcast. I'm Andrew Downey, and this is just an epic photo from my recent Pacific Crest Trail hike. That was, what is that? It's about 2,600 miles from Mexico to Canada. And Kai and Teo, this picture is of the three of us up on this plateau. It's probably around 11,000 feet, something like that. And it's in between Mount Whitney and Forester Pass. Mount Whitney is the tallest mountain in the lower 48, and Forester's Pass is the highest point on the Pacific Crest Trail. And so there's a sweet young lady sitting up on this plateau. She is from the East Coast, and she was just sitting there sobbing with how beautiful of a view it was. And I gently said hello, and we got a few minutes to be together and just enjoy how epically beautiful the area was before Kai and Teo caught up to me, and she took this photo of us. So anyway, I you spend a lot of time, if you're walking for a number of months to cover that kind of distance, you've got plenty of time to exist without any difficulties. Your body gets so crazy fit that you can just walk from dawn till dusk or longer. And so you've got plenty of time, and I've got a pretty good skill set of just being in my body and not having my mental activity rampant. And so many people struggle with that. And I really wish more people had that wonderful ability to kind of step into the space in between thoughts and then just exist inside of that space and not be so addicted to the continuous thought process. And well, while walking, I spent a lot of time just in that space of just really just feeling and experiencing through my body while I walked. And that's actually where this podcast came from. I built all these over the last 25 years. I built these, hundreds and hundreds of slides just to communicate with our practice members, because I remember this man who went to chiropractic college with Naomi. I remember him saying one time, he's like, if people understood what we understand about life and chiropractic and health and the spine, then everybody would be in care and we would have a healthier culture. He's correct about that. It's incredible to me that people are happy to go see a dentist as regularly as the dentist recommends. And those are your teeth, and your teeth are really important. But when you think about it, it's like your spine is so much more important than your teeth. They're both important, but it's like, the spine is this is where your spinal cord is housed. It's so important. It's protected in bone, right? It's the central control system through the core of your being. And when things are out of alignment in your spine, your nervous system doesn't function the way that it's intended to function. And so it just makes sense to have the spine in alignment. It's so simple, but just like we're going to allude to in this conversation today, as we explore some of the depths of educated intelligence versus body wisdom, and discuss educated intelligence, that we've got these different intelligences that are operating inside of us. And some of them can be controlled, and some of them are uncontrollable. Your innate intelligence is uncontrollable. It can be dialed down by defended physiology in your body and stressful patterns inside of your system. It's still going to be working to its absolute best, and you can't turn it up or turn it down through mental thoughts or something like that. But you can change your body wisdom. You can choose where you place your focus and attention, and you can hear that inner voice to a greater or less degree with your own volition. And then our educated intelligence has the tendency to be nudged around by culture and the dominant forces inside of culture. And so that's what we're talking about today. We're still on that subject matter. And we all know that culture is kind of pushed around by whoever the storytellers are, whoever the dominant storytellers are. They're the ones that have written the history books. Those are the ones that make the recommendations. These are the controlling agencies in our world. And it's very good to be aware that 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 just because there's a storyline out there, it doesn't mean that the storyline is correct. Just think about how, like when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, they would be teaching the 4 food groups. This is what's taught in school, but all of that curriculum is provided by the Sugar Association or the USDA or something along these lines. And so the storyline can change, but marketing, advertising, things, culture gets pushed around. It's a public relations company that rebrands pork bellies, which nobody would buy at any price really, to bacon, and then create it into existence as a breakfast food that it goes completely through the roof. And it sways an opinion about the same thing, but it's just rebranded. And so we have these, what I would say, like false dichotomies, So if we're talking about educated intelligence versus body wisdom, or the mechanistic viewpoint versus the vitalistic viewpoint, these are all, they're false dichotomies. And we know that controlling entities, the controlling entities, they're going to do their best to create systems that then control the way that people think. And if they can control the way that a person thinks, then they can move their agenda forward. Now, I've always found it very difficult to figure out like what the agenda is. But the older that I've gotten, the more that I have found to just distrust whatever the agency is, whatever the dominant storytellers are saying. It's probably not the complete truth. They're either leaving out very important data, like the vitalists, the people that were promoting religions when religion had were the dominant storytellers, and they were forceful. We got to remember that there were a lot of people, a lot of wars have happened um, because my God's better than your God, right? A lot of wars, a lot of people have died. A lot of people have been persecuted because they didn't think the way that the storytellers were telling them to think. And um, and so as the authority figures are able to get inside and dictate, nudge culture in specific directions, they can exert control over the populations and get them to bend to their will, um, with less use of force in general. So sometimes they end up using a lot of force, but if you can control the way that a person thinks, and then they're going to act in alignment a lot of times with that thinking pattern. It'll be their default way to think about things, and they don't question if a lie is repeated long enough, then it's just the action that the person takes. And so you it you don't have to use as much violence and resources to control a population if they're imprisoned inside of their own intellect. And so as I've gotten older, I mean, I became acutely aware of the conversation between the atomists or the materialists and the more spiritual, vitalistic people and the religious people. You know, that's a pretty big rift between those two ideologies, and culture seems to swing like a pendulum back and forth between ideologies, and sometimes the pendulum switches directions. And so for thousands of years people were arguing between vitalism and mechanism, and this just keeps people divided. And I'm the one, I'm arguing for people to find some sort of dynamic balance between the two, that there is a physical dimension, and Newtonian physics is, uh, grossly accurate. And it has some faults, just like quantum mechanics has some faults. And there's a huge array of wisdom and better life to come from religious and spiritual pursuits. And then there are, huge faults with religious and spiritual traditions. And so it's an interesting thing. And I think that, so what I'm always arguing for is some sort of dynamic balance, or some sort of chaotic commingling between the two different sides of any continuum that culture seems to be faced with. And I think it's good to just go through the mental exercises that, how do you feel about what happened with the year 2020, 2021, 2022, masks, mRNA injections, the different conversations that culture was having? What were the dominant storytellers saying? What did culture do? What was culture's response? Who were the people that said, no, I don't think this is quite right? What did science say? What did you bother looking at any literature? Did you just go along with the herd? These are all very important things to look at. And it's the same thing with diet and nutrition, the origins of World War I. Where did that actually come from? We know that the winners write the winners of the war write the history book. Did they set up the treaty at Versailles to, absolutely guarantee a second world war? do you know there's a lot at play. And now we have this giant rift between this two-party system here, whether it's on the planet or just the Western world, between, you know, people that are on the political left and people that are on the political right. And it seems like the attention is given all to the farthest polarized um, players inside of that game, because that's what gets the clicks and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, I'm not going to do any clickbaity kind of stuff. It's like I'm looking for, something that's not on, like on the political spectrum. I would say that I'm not on the political spectrum. I think it's two wings of the same bird going in a direction. I don't know exactly what that direction is, but I'm arguing that generally the storyline that we've been taught has that there's been enough manipulation to the storyline that us really embracing our own critical thinking, having an open mind, that's how we're going to extract the highest quality of life for ourselves and for our family. And being pushed around by culture, I would say, is a turns into a bit of a crapshoot with the way your life is going to unfold. And I think there's some really serious mistakes that culture is leading people down that really, really destroy, that you could destroy your life pretty easily. And so as this conversation that I'm, I don't know, inviting people to just be really involved with, the core of it is between the educated intelligence and body wisdom. And like I've said the last number of days, I'm just arguing to dial up the amount of body wisdom and investigate the technologies that help you become more involved in your body, whether it's my company, ELAN, or the good people over in the network community, or the BGI community, the flow community, the Feldenkrais community, the Alexander technique community. There's a lot of them out there. And so these are all going to dial up your body wisdom, your ability to hear what your inner dialogue is. And then it's up to you to decide what is that speaking from inside of you. And that's a really beautiful investigation. I wouldn't rip you off by giving you the answer because I'm probably wrong anyway. I'm just, another one of these people that are, doing the best to make it in this world. But, I'm in my mid 50s now, and my life is super fantastic. And because Naomi and I have been living on the edge of what's reasonable for so long, but things are turning out so incredibly well. It can't be luck. And so it's like, I've got something to say. It's probably important that I say it. At least I won't be able to tolerate myself if I don't say it. And so here we are with Democritus, who lived in and around 400 BC, and we got Plato and his student Aristotle. And these just represent the two different mindsets that the materialists or the atomists were saying. It's like the body is the sum of its parts, that it's just a complicated machine. So if you understand all of the parts of the machine, you can take a part out and you can put another part in. And that is what is going to help the person be healthy, if we're talking about healthcare in this situation, or sickness and disease management would be more accurate. It's the mechanistic viewpoint. It weighs heavy on the educated intelligence side, and their core philosophy is reductionism, meaning if you know more and more about the smaller and smaller pieces, Once you know everything that there is to know about the smallest pieces, you'll then be able to extrapolate back to the whole and understand the wholeness of everything by studying more and more about smaller and smaller things. The problem with that is that the people that study the smaller and smaller and smaller things, they don't communicate. So now maybe AI is going to help a lot with that. I think there's probably going to be a lot of integration in the reductionistic model as time goes on, and there's going to be huge amounts of embrace for that, and I'm a fan of that, right? It's like we have these wonderful breakthroughs. This is a valuable position, and what I'm really getting at here is that for millennia, religion was the dominant storyteller, and that pendulum swung from religion to the mechanistic scientific model. And now we live inside the religion of the scientific model, even though the scientific model, so much of it is bought and paid for by big corporations, non-governmental organizations, governments themselves, and they have agendas to put across to people. So they, if the Sugar Association funds a study to, talk, whatever it happens to be, they have a vested interest. Everybody understands this kind of stuff. And so much of our media is brought to you by Pfizer. And so the pendulum has swung from the religious point of view over to the mechanistic scientific point of view. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. What I'm saying is that the overall aspect of it is that there differing philosophies, these things are used as control mechanisms. The religion was used as a control mechanism. Now we're looking at science being used as a control mechanism, right? Trust the science, even though the science sometimes is not the best science in the world. And you could question it deeply. And but there's value in both. And so that's where my argument lies. And so, the Plato and Aristotle, these philosophers, these people, they're saying that the body is more than the sum of its parts. It's like you're a body and a soul. Remember, I ended up yesterday with, that little factoid that in 1907, McDougall weighed a body before and after the individual died, and there was a difference of 21 grams, leading to, some suspicion that which leaves the body right during, something went away. Whatever that is, I don't know, but it weighs 21 grams. And so, Plato and Aristotle are, saying that, hey, man, you're more than the sum of the parts. You're a body and a soul. You're an innate intelligence. You are body wisdom. You're an energetic being having a physical experience. That's this stuff. Their core philosophy is deductionism, right? So we've got this thing is that if there's an almighty God that manifests you into existence, you're a sliver of it, right? And this is a big premise in religions. If there's anything wrong with deduction, with the deducing of logic, then you end up with really, really big problems. And so there are problems with the core philosophy of deduction, which is if you start with a major premise and then you deduce from there, any of the things that you come to can be off if any of your logic is off. And then we have this problem with the core philosophy of reductionism, because they study more and more about less and less, but then they don't cross communicate, and they assume that there's no ghost in the machine. And so we've got this giant rift through culture. And, when you create a rift through culture, then you can leverage people against each other. You can keep them inside of this good, bad, right, wrong thing, situation culturally, and then you can control them as you swing things around. And so these two big ways of thinking about the world, mechanism um, and deduction, these two things have been like arguing, having philosophical debate, and at sometimes persecuting each other. Right? They've been debating for hundreds and hundreds of years on what is the meaning of life. Is there even a meaning of life? What is life? Right? And it's so beautiful because you would never really think, people would not think that the profession of chiropractic has a definition of life that is so fantastic. The definition of life, when it comes through from the chiropractic philosophy, which is a vitalistic philosophy. It's a philosophy that's deduced from the major premise that there's a universal intelligence in all matter that continuously gives all of its actions and properties, therefore maintaining it in existence. That's the major premise. And a derivative of that, I'm not going to go through all of them, but is the definition of life, which is life is the expression of intelligence. It's the expression of intelligence through matter by a force, meaning that there is an intelligence that's being pushed through matter by a force, right? I mean, that's pretty incredible. And I would say that that intelligence is your soul, and the matter is your physical body, and the force is your spirit. That's what I would say that it is. This is what I've made up because they didn't use exactly those words, but there's a difference between spirit and soul as far as I'm concerned. And these are all, and that's what I really like about spirituality, is that we all get to discover and play with, what is this? Where does this come from? How does this work? And that investigation, I'm a fan of the investigation. And because it makes your life richer, it makes your story better. That, if everything's just all ball bearings and there's no meaning and there's no purpose to anything, you can end up very nihilistic. If nothing has any meaning or purpose, then you can just do anything you want because there's no repercussions. Nobody's going to remember you in history anyway. Your life doesn't matter. There is no guiding force. I mean, that's just the most boring way to think about existence, in my opinion, right? And so the good chiropractors are going to say that life is the expression of intelligence through matter by a force. I mean, write that down and play with that. You can get a lot of mileage out of that concept. And so these the mechanists and the vitalists have been arguing about health and disease. Some of the vitalists are going to say that health degrades, or health improves when you move forward on your inner journey of discovery, that there's this vital capacity inside of you. And when you harness this vital capacity and you do things that increase your vitality, then your body has an energy that it can create more living, healthy tissue from, and so that your body is a self-healing, self-organizing, physical thing that an entity lives inside of. That you've got a ghost in the machine, and the more energy that you have, then the more power it has for the reorganization and repair of the system, and the better you can fight entropy. And on the materialist side, they go, that's just not really true. Exercise and nutrition is generally an okay thing, but most medical doctors these days have got like 2 weeks of nutrition, and I'm not too sure they're the best people to go and listen to from, to get nutritional advice from. But they're not into the energy side of it, which is sad. But I do recognize that a lot of the medical doctors are moving in the direction of vitalism, and I really appreciate that. But the materialists, the mechanists would say that symptoms have no meaning or purpose, right? They're just this thing that's just a nuisance, and you might as well just get rid of them. However, you can get you've got a headache. Take an Excedrin, right? Get rid of the headache. It has no meaning or purpose. Whereas the vitalists will say, how about being a little bit more self-reflective? And what do you think? Why do you think you have headaches? Well, you know what? My daughter is always hassling me to drink more water, but I just don't seem to drink more water. And it's just like, I wonder if you pay attention to that inner knowing, I wonder what would happen. What do you think would happen? They're different philosophies, and you can take it to a nonsensical place of, you've got a headache, take Excedrin to get rid of your headache, or drink some water. And it doesn't mean that taking the Excedrin will get rid of the headache, and it doesn't mean that drinking the water will get rid of the headache. But they're completely different philosophies. You know what I mean? Because it's like, not every time that somebody has a headache do they take an Excedrin and the pain go away. And also, not all the time that somebody drinks water and their headache goes away, right? But when you take that personal power of like listening to your inner self, asking yourself the question, I've got this problem, what can I do about it? What's the lesson that I can learn from the symptom? Let's say that the symptom is a gift, not just this random act. That the symptom's a gift, the symptom was given to you for you to learn and grow from. Maybe the first, second, third thing that you take action with in relationship to the symptom doesn't have any impact, but maybe the fifth thing that you do, maybe that solves it and solves it forever. Think about how much that adds to the structure of your character, that you were the one with the difficulty. You're the one that came up with the answer. The answer came from inside of you. How powerful is that? That's going to nudge you in the direction of trusting yourself that you're not broken. You've got the answers. It gives you more autonomy. It makes you more effective in life. And the more effective you are, then the less you're being pushed around by culture. But if you're always going to put yourself off to an expert, you got headaches, you go to the chiropractor, the acupuncturist, the medical doctor, the regressional hypnotherapist, the nutritionist, and they're telling you what to do. You're continuously sabotaging your own strength, your own capacity as a person, right? And I hope that makes sense. And so some of these things, because it's just like I'm like on this concept of like the mechanistic viewpoint, the vitalistic viewpoint, like a dog with a bone, because it matters. Your definition of life, your understanding of that matters. You coming to a conclusion about whether symptoms can have meaning or not, right? That matters, right? Coming to a conclusion about what are the goal of relationships, leading down the materialistic pathway, the educated knowledge pathway. Relationships are often used for what you can get out of the relationship, whether it's sex or money or power or whatever it happens to be. On the vitalistic side of things, it has more of a tendency to be of like true energetic bonding, feeling found, finding others, right? A true energetic bonding, a trust, right? That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But then, so these things all matter so much. That's why I'm harping on the subject matter, And so the conversation goes on. what is the supreme agency? What is controlling things? Is it a is it an energetic intelligence? Is it just randomness? You know, what are you willing to do to achieve success? Are you going to be tapped into the flow of the universe around you, your inner flow? Are you going to do what you're told by your inner self, whatever that is? And is that going to be a deeper sense of success than if you just do what you're told? You know, you become an engineer because your daddy told you to be an engineer and you want to live up to his expectations of it. So you're doing what you're told, right? So now you're an engineer and you make however much money and you have a ton of material possessions, but you're unsatisfied. You're not happy with what your life is like, right? I'm not saying that this is a black and white situation, and there's plenty of engineers that I'm sure that are completely happy. I'm just trying to get a point across, right? So it extends further into what people embrace. You know, do you embrace your inner dialogue and embrace your personal journey and look at it as this mysterious, freaking rad adventure? Or are you, just, embracing on the materialistic side? They have the tendency to embrace more and more control, right? How do they dial down the chaos? How do they dial down the variability? How do they increase control? Yet the more control that they're successful um, in exerting, the universe seems to bring them things that take them out of control in ways that they don't understand, right? And how are you gonna solve your problems? That's the last one on my this is a very little list, but I wanted to jot some of these things down. Like, how are you going to solve things? Are you coming from the position that you're going to need to ask somebody else to fix your problems for you? Or are you going to go internally and reflect on it and let that deep well of information bubble up from inside of you to come up with your own solutions? You know, is your problem solving that you've got a cold, and so you're going to take some over the counter, inexpensive medication to solve your cold for you. But if you have cancer, you're going to take some super dangerous cobalt radiation, right? This is the mechanistic viewpoint. You're this nonlinear, or you're this linear being, and that if you have a small problem, you have a small solution to it. You've got a cold, you take an over-the-counter medication that's inexpensive. But if you've got a really serious disease or a really serious problem, then you're willing to put something in your body that would make a vibrantly healthy person sick and die, right? Think of the logic of that, right? You're really sick. And then the best people in the world, right? The best, they're going to tell you to put some sort of radiation inside of your body, some chemotherapeutic that is going to, that somehow that's going to make you better, right? How many decades of research do we need to say that the cancer industry is an industry and that it is failing the population tremendously? Right? That's it. So human beings are nonlinear, right? I was saying a couple weeks ago or a week ago or whatever, you're driving down the road. So the linearity, the thought from the mechanist is that we're linear, that A plus B equals C. Small problem, small solution. Big problem, big toxic solution. But we're actually nonlinear. That you're driving down the road, a few flickers, some blue and white and red photons bounce off your rear view mirror, and all of a sudden you have this giant cascade of hormones move through your body. You start sweating profusely, your mental activity goes through the roof, and you get concerned or whatever it happens to be, right? Somebody says the right thing at the right time to you, and your body totally lights up, right? Is it possible that you can have a serious disease and make a small change in your life, and that it profoundly affects the direction that you're traveling with that specific disease. Is that possible? Right? Can you do something really small and really easy, but have such a profound effect on your physiology that the disease goes away? There's a great book called Spontaneous Remissions. It's a book full of like anecdotal stories of spontaneous remission, of somebody doing something small, thinking about something differently, acting a little bit differently in relationship with themselves or others, moving forward. Is it possible that you can let's say you have uh, the typical metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, you're pushing diabetes type 2, you're freaking killing yourself, and you do a small thing, right? You 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 quit your job, right? You make a transition. That's a small thing. It's a medium-sized thing, let's say. You move in a different direction. You choose to take you choose to take a smaller medium course correct. How much does that change your physiology? How much does it change the manifestation of your disease, right? You choose to read a book that somebody recommends. What's the cascade of that, right? So anyway, these are things that I think are really important for people to jabber about internally with themselves, get clear with. And so what happened is that in the late 1800s, middle 1800s, the vitalists, they had a very strong scientific following. But what happened in 1859 is that Charles Darwin published his book, Origin of Species. And what this does is this really pulls the rug out from underneath the vitalists. This was the seminal work that really pushed the vitalists out of the domain of what's acceptable, real. You know, Microsoft Word doesn't even know how to correct the spelling of the word vitalists. That's how far out of trend the vitalism and vitality is. It's such an interesting thing. And so, you know, Charles Darwin was promoting the natural selection, survival of the fittest. A lot of what it is, my understanding is that a lot of what he did was that he plagiarized a whole lot of his work. But that's, you know, that's beyond what it is that we really need to talk about. But you could look that up if you wanted to. And they emphasized some sort of hereditary factors. This was before, you know, Watson and Crick stole the structure of the double helix of DNA from that researcher lady, Rosemary. This bothers me, you know, because I don't have it like locked in my head. It's like I know Watson and Crick because it's been repeated so much in my coursework. But in the book, the fantastic book, Molecules of Emotion by Dr. Candace Pert, the late Dr. Candace Pert, she shares this story of this researcher who discovered the double helix of the structure of DNA. And Watson and Crick paid somebody to break into her lab and steal her stuff and take her material, and they published it. And they were higher up in the scientific community in that research area. And she was obviously pissed about it, and she didn't stand up for herself. Now, in the book Molecules of Emotion, which we'll do a deep dive on that because that one matters. It's talking about origin. It alludes to origins of disease, right? But that's a delicate subject matter. You get busted for telling people what to do as far as health goes. So everything's just a suggestion, right? Do more research. Don't trust me, don't trust anybody else. Trust your, prescribing physician, whatever that ridiculous stuff needs to be. Um, and but this lady didn't stand up for herself, and she was told by her superiors, it's just like, let this go, and Watson and Crick get the Nobel for this. They go down in history as this epically good thing. And it's like, your time will come, you're young, you'll get it the next time it goes around. Well, this deeply bothered her. Well, this young researcher, she was dead, I believe, within 5 years from breast cancer. Now, is there a relationship between, let's say you're a woman and you don't speak up for yourself and you feel like something is unfair and you don't say something, you don't do something about it? Is it possible that these are some of the deeper roots of where cancer can come from, right? As a species, we're not certain of where cancer comes from, right? I like to think that I have some of the origins of it. I wouldn't put it past the human physiology to produce cancer because somebody isn't, has a real issue. They have this driving force inside of them to do something about something, and then they don't do it. And so it causes them real deep hurt inside. And that hurt manifests as, anger, frustration, resentment, whatever, and it manifests into cancer. Is that possible? I think it's possible. Is there good research on it? Not that I'm aware of, right? But I think it's possible. And so it's good to know that Charles Darwin pulled the rug out from underneath, the vitalists. I think that he stole it, just like Watson and Crick stole the organization of DNA, right? And Darwin's theory denied the necessity of spirit or life force because now we've got these controlling factors of genes. And I'll leave you with this. But what did we learn in 1982? I learned this from Bruce Lipton, that in some peer-reviewed journal article by Nihao in 1982, the role of metaphors in science, it clearly states that, before we understood what DNA is, we were talking about hereditary factors, and we started to use this idea as a metaphor that the hereditary factors, they turned on, and that gave expression to the cell, to the organism. And that metaphor of the gene turning on or the hereditary factors turning on stayed inside of the lexicon throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, up until this day. People think that genes turn themselves on and turn themselves off, right? That the gene is the controlling factor. But what we know is that genes don't have the ability to turn themselves on or turn themselves off. This gives rise to the entire scientific splinter of epigenetics. And so it's really good to understand that and we'll do a deep dive. We'll do a deep dive on how genes don't turn themselves on, genes don't turn themselves off. There are other mechanisms in play, and so culture sways. The ideas of culture sways, and may you be being nudged in the direction of listening to your body's wisdom more and leaving more possibility for vitalism and the domain of energy to be enlivening you.